Name.
Okay. So here we go.
Rabbi, can
Yes.
I ask you, on my screen, it always says this meeting is being recorded. So should I press OK?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's basically making people aware that the meeting's being recorded. And if for
Oh,
some
okay.
reason you didn't want to have your brilliant insights recorded for posterity or at least for YouTube, you could leave. One of the things I have noticed is it doesn't record your names, even though we can see
No.
names on the screen. I'm actually thankful that it doesn't do that. So the subject tonight actually is from the book of Leviticus. There is a commandment which we'll read in a few moments of rebuking your neighbor. Um, and there's actually two pretty long articles on this. I don't think the second article is repetitious, but I'll have to reread it again. I don't think we're going to get through the first one tonight. So this is an interesting commandment. It's one of the 613. And by the way, on Wednesday we're going to be discussing the 613 commandments. So if that's of an interest to you, we'll get there. But
One night,
as you'll sorry.
on one night,
Oh, we're not
613.
going to read them all, but at least we're going to discuss the concept of 613 commandments.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So one and a very interesting commandment, as we'll see, is the obligation to rebuke your neighbor when and thereby not fall into sin. And as we'll see, big surprise, the Hebrew can be interpreted lots of different ways. Is it the person that's not supposed to fall in sin that is being rebuked? Is it the rebuker that's not supposed to fall in sin? So there's all kinds of wonderful ambiguity in Hebrew, which makes our lives a richer place, at least my life a richer place. And so that's part of the interest. And whenever I read this commandment, I'm reminded of an episode of a friend who actually a congregant of mine who was playing golf and with three golf buddies, and one of the people with whom he was playing golf made some comment about negotiating or going for a low price, and used the phrase he Jewed him down. So this is using the word Jew as a verb, which means to negotiate or anyway, it's not considered nice. And my friend said I really called him out on it and demanded that he apologize. And he asked me, as his rabbi, did he do the right thing? So actually, I'll just finish the story about where I came out, and we'll see what the texts say.
Only privately.
Sorry. Yeah. I think it may be in the second article. I don't know. You're obligated to rebuke. It's not a suggestion. It's a commandment. So that was correct, but you need to do it in a way in which it will be heard. So my only comment to him was, you did the right thing, but rather than do it publicly in front of all of his friends, and which of course he would never apologize, you could have said something like, I'm sure you didn't mean this as an insult and as an anti-Jewish sentiment or statement, but you should know that I'm Jewish. And when we hear that kind of language, it's painful. And I'm sure you didn't mean it that way. That would have gotten the same information across, and it probably would have been better heard. So that's kind of my general introduction to this discussion. I don't know if anyone else has a comment on rebuking or reproving or reproaching. There's actually a lot of words in English, and some of the interesting things in this article is thinking about what the English words mean and where they come from.
Well,
Okay.
it's happened to me many, many years ago in a golf course. I was playing with a group of guys who I didn't know, and I was trying to hit a ball, and the guy said to me out loud, "Your action drives me crazy."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I put down I put down my golf club and I went after him, and the guys held me back. And I didn't use any words to rebuke him, but I I wanted to take him out from the golf cart.
Okay, so how would other people handle that?
The other two guys who were with me on the golf course held me back, and he said that's not the right attitude.
Okay, so they rebuked him by criticizing his attitude.
Yes.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I just want to publicly say that I think Erwin's accent is adorable.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Alan?
What I try to do, but I'm really not good at it, is turn something into a question. So why did you say that? To help them understand, because normally I would have a knee-jerk reaction and saying, well, that's an anti-Semitic thing. You shouldn't do that.
Oh, you're talking about the Jewing down?
Yeah, I many years ago, like I was thinking it was working for a company, and the people around me were not Jewish, and the subject did have to do with pricing, and that's how this person did. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
I didn't like it, and I treated it as, and I didn't say anything. So the the challenge is to learn how to do what you said,
Yeah,
Rabbi.
and it's it's also a real issue when people make, racist comments or I would say even political comments that go over the top or get personal. So it's not just anti-Semitic issues. Joanne.
I just think that we all do it sometimes. Sometimes it may be a little harder, but being language sensitive is very important. It's how you phrase something and how you say
Yes.
it to somebody that's going to really make the difference.
Yes. So I agree with you on that. And the old statement, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never harm me." That's not a Jewish sentiment. Words, as we'll see in this discussion, are very powerful
Yeah.
and can be very painful. And I really think I've had interesting arguments with people about this, is that we really I almost think of it like how in Word, Microsoft Word, when you're typing, there's a spell checker, and as soon as you misspell a word, it lets you know so you can go back and fix it.
Right.
I particularly when I'm speaking as a rabbi, I am very conscious of this, and I'm always almost putting a draft of what I'm about to say in my head and wondering whether there's something about what I'm about to say that could hurt someone or hurt someone's feelings. And and um and I'll give you an example that you might not think of. A lot of stuff I have learned from my rabbi, who is Sonia, who has a much more nuanced sense of interpersonal relations um, and being thoughtful than I do. Um, and so, for example, it's very American to ask personal questions. What do you do for a living? How many kids do you have? Um, and those questions can be quite painful. So, for many people, no problem. You just answer them. For what do you do for a living? Someone may have just been fired, or they are having trouble finding a job and they're forced to work at a job that they're ashamed of. How many kids do you have? Well, there's lots of people that that have lost a child. So how do you answer that question? Do you make a public statement that, I had two, but now I only have one? Do you say, let's say you had two children and one died. Do you say one or two? It's a painful question. And and Sonia has taught me, and I absolutely agree with her, that we need to be very careful. I mean, it's continuing just what we were talking about a moment ago, not to ask those questions. There are ways to engage in conversation. So, for example, I will never ask anyone what they do for a living. I will say, I'll meet someone at I don't know, a Kabbalah class, and I'll say something like, well, when you're not studying Kabbalah, what keeps you busy? What kinds of things do you enjoy doing? And people may want to talk about their job, or they may want to talk about, gardening. But I'm not putting them on the spot and pushing them into something that could be painful for them. Now, people have criticized that approach and criticized me by saying it's too politically correct, and why should we have to be so careful, and so on. And the answer is, you should be careful not to cause pain to people. That's not overdoing it. Hold on, Alan. I'm going to call on Paul and then Jerry. Yeah,
sometimes, sometimes I ask myself, I say to myself before I say it to the person, what led you to say that to me? That's how I break the ice. And I don't know if it's good or bad. I have no idea, but I'd like to know what led them on to say that, and what was it about? And that's how I look at it.
Well, it depends on what context. If someone makes sort of a racist comment,
right,
and then you say, what led you to say that? I would say that is correctly interpreted as a reaction and an attack on that person for a racist comment.
Really? Okay.
I remember once again at a family gathering, one of, kind of a distant cousin, lives in the South, made a comment which was racially insensitive and actually to some of us shocking. And another relative had a response which I thought was brilliant. And her response was, "I'm sorry you feel that way," which I thought was brilliant.
That's very good. Yeah.
Another great example of that, which I will never forget, is I had a black eye once, and I was in rabbinical school. And I'm not going to go into how I happened to get this black eye, but suffice to say, it was not something I wanted to talk about. And many people, my classmates, would come up, and I think it's hysterical the way they would introduce this comment was, "Well, I don't want to pry, but
yes, right.
how'd you get the black eye?" And I remember, asking, I remember responding, "Boy, I'm glad you don't want to pry," and walked away. And our counseling teacher, when she saw me, I don't even know if she gave me a hug or she said, "Oh, that looks like it hurts."
Yeah, it's really
okay.
Nice.
It was recognizing, that she saw it, that she's connecting with me. But if I felt like talking to her about it, I could, but I didn't have to.
Yeah.
So again, this is, I guess you could call it thoughtful speaking.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Jerry,
Okay.
and then Alan, and then Erwin.
When my son was living abroad and he came home, I asked him what he noticed about the people in Salamanca in Spain. What differences did you notice? And he said, well, here we say, what do you do for a living? There they say, what do you dream of?
Oh, that's nice. And yeah.
And I started doing that. I just thought, wow, that is beautiful. And you really do get to know more about the person and the depth of their character
Yes.
than what they typically do.
Yes. And more importantly than that, you don't put the person in a place that they don't want to be. Alan.
Right. There you go.
So, Rabbi, since we all know your situation and you alluded to this earlier, what would be the most sensitive way to ask you about your family without asking how many children do you have and putting you in the spot of where you gave an example of, where, you were referring to Stephanie.
Yeah. So, I mean,
What's the right way to ask the question about your family? Yeah.
So you could just say, "How's your family doing?" And I will often respond to that. Everybody's doing just about what they should be doing. If I don't want to engage in that discussion, but Americans have it. American culture is very ill-mannered. Sonia will say, I don't notice this so much and maybe I'm oblivious to it. People will ask, well, how much did that car cost? Or how much do you make at the job? And people in her upbringing, which are basically French manners, would be horrified and are horrified
You
if
worked in a
people would.
company where there was a actual corporate policy that you did not to ask each other what you made. Yeah, and I worked for another company where they didn't have that policy, and people did that all the time, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
crazy. It was crazy.
yes. Erwin, you had your hand.
Yeah,
Oh,
you know, when I came to this country, I think about 50 years ago, and when I used to go to some gathering with my wife, the first question I used to get, where did you come from? And in the beginning, I was very sensitive to it, but maybe a person didn't mean any ill
yeah.
meaning,
I
but
I mean, yes.
you
So
know,
I
I
have
was
to say,
sensitive to it.
the doctor I met with today was Persian. He had an odd name, and I don't even know if he had an accent. But I will confess to asking that question. And by the way, I want to mention, Erwin, the way I usually like to deflect things with humor. So if someone asked me about my accent, as somebody said to me, your accent is driving you crazy, I might have responded, I don't have an accent, but everybody I know has an accent.
Yeah,
And
I
I've
used to
managed
say
to,
that.
and I
I
and I
used to say that
yeah,
when the people ask me where I come from, I tell them from Thousand Oaks.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
That's
that
funny.
will drive them crazy. Okay, Jerry, I presume your hand is up from before, Joanne.
So I like what everybody is saying very much, and you're also making me think about when part of what I do in business is public speaking, and something that I really impress upon the audience is the importance, because I do a lot of work with home care, of being sensitive to the cross-cultural interface
Yes.
and take it easy, because everybody comes from a different background. And what may be something that you just consider part of daily living, they don't know what you're talking about. I mean,
Yep.
I had a circumstance where a family member asked the home attendant to make a hamburger for the individual, and the home attendant didn't have a clue as to what a hamburger
Mm.
was. So I had the family member demonstrate and offer to her and just say, please, if you need help again, we can show you what to do.
Yeah. So there's issues of knowledge, but also I thought maybe you were going to suggest maybe the attendant was a Hindu, and preparing a meat dish might have been very offensive, and that's a
Right. Yeah.
possibility also.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
be really, really careful. And sometimes
Yes.
it can't
Right.
be, sometimes things happen. And if
Yes.
something happens and it's negative, then you just want to apologize at
Right.
least
Right.
and make it so that everybody's comfortable.
Right.
But it's all.
Right. Farah, did you want to say something?
Yes, many people ask me, where are you from? And many people say, we can't understand your accent. I think they want to help me. When they say they can't understand my accent, I try to change it, to improve it, that other people can understand that. I never get it as a personal that they want to hurt me or they didn't know what
Right.
they say. I just
Yeah.
take it as
Yeah.
positive.
And Sonia's not a native English speaker, and she will have much more trouble with people's accents. And I'm not talking necessarily about foreign accents, but even like Southern accent or British accent would be a foreign accent, but Southern accent or a Boston accent, she'll have a lot of trouble understanding that. And I
You,
run into that all the time. Being on the computer, you're calling tech support, and it may be someone in India, and I will always, if I have to ask someone to slow down and speak more clearly, I will try and preface it by saying, I know that your Hindi is better than mine, but unfortunately we have to communicate in English.
Yeah.
So I try and not make it seem like I'm being
Yeah,
critical.
but I get as positive, not negative.
Yes, yes. And that's actually a whole other subject, which is, acting as though you're an optimist or a pessimist. Do you view these interactions as someone trying to criticize you or someone trying to help you? I will say that it may be one or the other, but you'll be happier if you assume people are being friendly and helpful rather than angry or critical.
I assume Sonia has mastered your New York accent by now.
Yeah, Sonia can more or less understand what I'm saying, assuming I don't mumble, which I sometimes do. Okay, so let us jump into our article. And Joanne, are you reading that this evening?
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll read the introduction. Do not hate, rebuke without sin. In sequence, Leviticus 19:17 commands do not hate, do rebuke, and do not incur guilt. What is the relationship between these imperatives, and what do they teach us about the biblical art of rebuke? Two professors. And this is actually Absalom causing Amnon to be slain. So Absalom is killing his half-brother for raping his sister. I mean, Bible stories. I didn't get these on in Bible school Sunday morning, the Golden Book of Bible Stories. That subject is actually discussed here. So tochacha, Joanne.
So the command of tochacha to rebuke, reprove, or reproach one's neighbor is located in a section of the Torah that is primarily concerned with interpersonal moral values, not only what one should do or not do, but also how one should think and feel. It is sandwiched between the command to not hate your brother and the golden rule to love your fellow as yourself.
Yeah, so this is a pretty interesting little bit of Torah. Well, it actually continues down here. It ends with maybe, one of the more famous commandments. And I think it was actually one that Jesus said was one of the most important commandments. Love your fellow or your neighbor as yourself. I am Hashem. And so there's going to be a lot of focus on the Hebrew. I'm not going to get into the Hebrew right now. So let's continue, Joanne.
You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely reproach your neighbor, and you shall bear no sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, and you shall love your fellow as yourself. I am Hashem.
Right. So there's a lot going on there.
Each of the precepts in these verses is defined is in particularistic rather than universal terms, concerned with the relationships between fellow Israelites. His brother of kinsman, his
So we have his ach, brother or kinsman, his amit,
ami. Okay.
Neighbor. I'll read these. And the bnei am, the sons of his people, and his rea, fellow or friend. There's a whole lot of ink spilled about where it says you shall love, in the Hebrew, it's v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your reacha as yourself. I am Adonai. There's a lot of discussion about whether that only applies to fellow Israelites in the text, or does it apply to everyone?
The biblical precept of tochacha is the command to verbally confront one's fellow Israelite about their wrongdoing. The infinitive absolute adds emphasis to the command.
So it's, hocheach tocheach et amitecha. So you see these two words, they even sort of sound like hocheach tocheach. It's called the infinitive absolute. It's a way in Hebrew of like putting in an exclamation point, or sometimes it's translated. I think Fox likes to translate it as "you shall surely." Oh, this translation also. You shall surely reproach your neighbor, or maybe it's Fox. I can't remember, but one of the more literal translators would say, "You shall reproach your neighbor." So it's a way of emphasis. I'll just read a little more in the in the grammar. It's formulated with the he-feel causative of yud chaf chet, meaning to decide, prove, or adjudge. There are forms of Hebrew verbs. This actually, well, some of this actually exists in English. So the simplest one was the difference between a direct verb and the passive verb. I hit, I punched him in the nose. That's active verb. He was punched in the nose is a passive verb. There's command forms and so on. In Hebrew, there is this really interesting form called the he-feel, which doesn't have an equivalent in English, which is causative. So, and the best example of that is lahadlik ner, which means we just translated to light the lights of Shabbat, but it's actually in the causative form. It really means to cause the lights to be lit. Anyway, without getting, I really like Hebrew grammar, so
You too.
yeah. Okay. So anyway, so let's continue here to engage in rebuke.
To engage in rebuke is to criticize another, impose judgment, declare what is wrong about their actions or speech in order to prompt a process of self-reflection and lead to changing their behavior or ways and mending the relationship.
I'll just note parenthetically, this is, I'm pretty sure, New Testament. Jim, you can check me on this. It says, judge not lest you be judged. That's not in the Hebrew Bible. We are judging all the time.
Well, there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
Judge not, lest you be judged. But then it goes, for the manner by which you judge, so shall you be judged. So if you judge, obviously you have to judge. We all go to jury duty. If you judge justly, you will be judged justly. If you judge unjustly, there's no guarantee.
Okay. Oh, I appreciate that correction. Okay, so let's continue. The Old French.
Old French reprocher conveys the relational aspect of a reproach, to draw close again. The Latin repropriare pivots between the prefix re, across from, and pro, near, suggesting an oppositional stance, a reproach rather than an approach.
I like this. The reproach, I never thought about this before, but gives sort of the flavor. I think what they were saying here is like to reapproach. So you're getting close to someone in this action. At least that's in the French.
Do not hate and do reproach. If there is a relationship between rebuking and the preceding command, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. Then one must rebuke one's kinsman in order not to harbor resentment and hate him within one's heart. Consider the silence of the brothers after Joseph tattles on them and in the face of their father's favoritism.
Okay, so I just want to point out, I'm going to go back up to the commandment. It begins by saying, you shall not hate a brother in your heart, and then you shall surely reproach your neighbor. So it follows. So now we're going to think about the connection between those two commandments, and beginning with the story of Joseph.
Okay, and when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. They do not directly rebuke Joseph, and the relationship devolves into near fratricide. To their credit, however, they do not feign a positive relationship with Joseph. Indeed, Rashbam emphasizes how we must not seem or appear to be a friend when we have been wronged. Yet he also asserts that we should externalize our feelings for the sake of reconciliation.
So this is kind of interesting. In the story of Joseph and his brothers, I mean, Joseph is kind of a jerk. He's bragging about his new coat, and his father gives him a beautiful coat, and he has dreams about his brothers bowing down to him and so on. But the brothers don't say anything, so there's no outlet. to their hostility. But they also, as Rashbam says, they don't fake being friendly when they have something. So we're getting both of those elements here. Oh, this is actually
Do not
sorry
hate
to
your
quote from Rashbam about 1,000 years ago.
Do not hate your brother in your heart. If he wronged you, do not appear to him as his friend. One speaks peaceably to his friend with his mouth, but inwardly he lays an ambush for him. This is not good. Rather, you shall surely reproach him for what he did, so that by doing so there would be peace between you and him. The Torah thus emphasizes the ideal of integrity and sincerity over hypocrisy.
Okay.
Do reproach and do not bear sin. The command that follows the rebuke is ambiguous. You shall surely reproach your neighbor and do not bear guilt because of him or it.
Mm-hmm.
How do we read the velu?
Below.
It is below.
Yeah, so it
is
says, so just to read the Hebrew, Hocheach tocheach et amitecha, which is surely reproach your neighbor. Below, tisa alav hate. So now the question is, what does this word below mean? And of course, this is going to be one of these examples where it can have several different meanings, which are very important to understanding it.
Is it a conjunction meaning either rebuke and do not bear guilt, or rebuke so that you do not bear guilt, which suggests that the law's primary concern is that the rebuke should occur? Or is it a disjunction, rebuke but not incur guilt, which emphasizes
rebuke but do not incur.
But do not incur guilt, which emphasizes how the rebuke should be given. In addition, who would bear, meaning carry, forbear, tolerate, or forgive the guilt, and how would it be incurred?
So you thought this was pretty clear, but there's at least 4 different ways to interpret it, which is why we have fun with Hebrew. Okay, so now we're going to examine the different ways of interpreting it.
Rebuke so that the victim won't incur guilt. Everett Fox and Robert Alter treat the velo as conjunctive, indicating the offended victim should rebuke the offender to clarify, to dispel, or to undercut the sense of grievance so that the aggrieved will not sin. You are not to hate your brother.
So this is Fox in the 5 books of Moses, Everett Fox.
You are not to hate your brother in your heart. Rebuke, yes, rebuke your fellow, that you not bear sin because of him.
So in this one, the presumption is if you don't rebuke, you actually bear some sin by not rebuking. So if someone makes a nasty comment and you let it slide, you are in some sense guilty of not rebuking. Okay. And now Robert Alter.
Alter the Hebrew Bible. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely reprove your fellow and not bear guilt because of him. Okay. Already Rashbam links the command not to bear guilt with the prohibition on taking vengeance. And bear no sin because of him in your heart. Thus, refraining from rebuke would result in the sin of bearing a grudge, the cause of hatred in the heart.
Okay, and again, just going back up to the original text, right after, you shall bear no sin because of him, you shall not take vengeance nor bear a grudge against the sons of your people, and so on. So by not rebuking, this insult festers, and then you bear a grudge. So he is connecting that. Okay, I think Erwin.
Yeah, Rabbi, when you get to my age and you hear a discussion between two persons, especially if my daughters are there, they always hold my hand and they tell me, "Dad, stay in your lane." Means don't interfere. But that means I am guilty if I'm not interfering in
Okay, so again, what I would say is we haven't gotten to this, and I think it's either later in this article, maybe in the second article. There are ways of, just to use your metaphor of driving, there are ways of changing lanes that are safe and ways that are not safe. So, as an example, someone makes a nasty comment. One possibility is one way of doing that is to rebuke, but gently. So, the example was that my I guess this is my sister-in-law hearing a racist comment from a family member that basically the comment was they live in the South and they really like blacks and have no problem. But her comment was they're so lazy. And so my sister-in-law's response was not just to let it go, but to say, I'm so sorry you feel that way. So that was pretty gentle. And the other way of doing it would be not to jump into their lane, but later on say, that's it hurts me that you feel, that you feel so comfortable saying that you say it in public.
Yeah, but Rabbi, there is an American slang. I think it's a slang when some people tell you, "Don't butt in. It's not of your business."
Yes, and sometimes it is not of your business, and sometimes it is of your business. But what I would say the Torah is saying is that if someone says or does something that deserves rebuke, it is your business. It is a mitzvah to make it your business, which is to say a commandment. And I would say that's not consistent with a lot of American culture. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Well,
Okay.
I find this very soothing. It's reminding me of parts of Musa,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Farah, you have your hand up.
Yes, I think love or hate is not something that you decide. You don't decide like your kids or your neighbor. It's something comes from your heart. When you see somebody that hurt you, okay, you rebuke him. It's not decide. What should I decide to this guy? Love him or rebuke him? I think it's something sense. It's not this
Yeah.
decision.
So it really depends on exactly what we mean by love. Um, and again, there's a lot of ink spilled about I mean, we have two places where it says v'ahavta, and one place which means you shall love, and one place is v'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, you shall love Adonai your God. We actually had a discussion on this, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your being.
Yeah.
So what in the world does that mean? Um, there are times when I am so angry with God that it's almost hard for me to express it in terms that I'm not embarrassed saying out loud. Um, and it says, love your neighbor as yourself. So what does that mean? It's probably not just simply romantic love, but yeah. So it goes deeper than feelings. You can't command a feeling, but clearly the Torah is commanding us to love. So there must be something else going on. Alan. Yeah.
Mute, right?
Yeah.
My question relates to the word rebuke. So I like to think that I'm obligated to help improve the community by better communicating. But it isn't always in the context of rebuking. It's speaking up when I should speak up and do it in a, you've sort of outlined doing it in a
So again, I would say,
yeah.
it's like a Venn diagram. I mean, you can speak up if someone says, you want to, I don't know, have better rules for when there's COVID, wearing masks and getting vaccinated. But this is really dealing with interpersonal relationships. Okay. Okay, so I think we're here, but I'm not 100% sure. Thus refraining.
James. Okay,
Oh,
Lucy.
I don't know.
I think James Kugel is where we
Okay.
start. James Hulu calls this externalizing model of rebuke. The sin is hatred or anger, and there are potentially disastrous results. The idea is prevalent throughout wisdom literature, especially in Proverbs, as a model for virtue or character education. Ben Sirah, a Jewish work that is part of the Catholic Old Testament canon, declares, Sirach says, how much better is it to rebuke than to fume?
Yeah, and this word is canon, which means holy text.
Okay.
Canaan is where we were hanging out, but the canon, it actually comes from the word for ruler, measuring stick.
Okay. Sirach, how much? Oh, here. The approach also aligns with Moses Maimonides' first model of rebuke.
Okay, let's see what the Rambam has to say.
Maimonides, the duty to rebuke. Maimonides speaks to the emotional dynamic when a grieved party has been sinned against, presumably unjustly. Refraining from verbal rebuke not only fails to disarm the anger, but through repression, allows it to simmer to a boil. He cites the example of Absalom, who is silent after Amnon rapes their half sister Tamar, but who later has Amnon murdered.
Oh, I just love these Bible stories.
Mishnah Torah, laws of character traits. When a person sins against another, the offended person should not hate the offender and keep silent, as it says about evildoers. And Absalom did not speak with Amnon, either evil or good, for Absalom hated Amnon.
Okay. And, I would say sometimes you hurt or offend someone and you simply don't know it. So, in my friend, who was upset by someone using the phrase Jew as a verb, um, I'm pretty sure that the person wasn't consciously using it as an anti-Semitic slur. And so just informing the person that that's a negative slur is helpful. I mean, I think this is actually quite true in racial terms. I remember reading a book, I can't remember the name of the book, but just being educated about things that, in this case, particularly black women may find offensive. And just comments about, wow, I love your hairstyle when it's completely afro and frizzy. Um, that 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 can be interpreted as offensive. And I'm just saying that you're pointing out a racial characteristic. So, I have to say when I read this, and I've since discussed it with black women, and it's just something I was not aware of, and so it's something I need to. It's helpful for someone to point it out. Um, um, there were a bunch of other things in this book which pointed out things that I was completely not aware of. Okay, I think we're right here,
I
rebuking.
just want to say, I think that communication is the hallmark, and it's very, very hard sometimes to keep everything in balance. Sometimes we have to learn, as sometimes if we're saying something, to recognize that perhaps what you think you're just saying may be quite offensive to the other person. It's very
Right.
hard,
It,
right?
it, it is hard, and I think I recognize you're not going to get it right all the time,
Right,
but that
exactly,
doesn't give you an excuse not to be sensitive to it.
exactly, right. Okay, rebuking his fellow is most emphatically a duty, a mitzvah, to ensure that the verbal rebuke preempts the sinful reaction that devolves into animosity and grudge bearing.
This is more Maimonides.
Laws of character traits. But it is his duty to inform him and say to him, why do you do this to me? Why do you sin against me in this matter? For it is written, you shall surely reproach Hohiak Tohiah, your neighbor. Maimonides' why appears to be a rhetorical question, as in God's rebuke of Cain. Why are you distressed, and why is your face fallen? Or Moses' rebuke of the two Hebrews fighting, why do you strike your fellow? Maimonides also adjures that offended party to accept, in the event of an apology, the offender's contrition and refrain from cruelty or vengeance, following the model of Abraham after Abimelech errs in taking Sarah into his house. Laws of character traits. If he has repented and asked for forgiveness, he should be forgiven. The person who so forgives must not be cruel, as it is written, Abraham prayed to God for the man who wronged him.
Yeah, that's one of these stories where Abraham passes Sarah off as his sister, and Abimelech takes her in and finds out that she's his wife, and he asks for forgiveness, and Abraham prays for his forgiveness.
Through reproach, hatred is mitigated, as well as vengeance and grudge bearing, ideally by voicing criticism and not harboring resentment or anger in the heart. A bystander's duty. Maimonides' second model of rebuke is pedagogic or altruistic and other directed, focused on one who observes another transgressing, but who has no personal stake in the matter. Laws of character traits. If one observes that a friend or colleague has committed a sin or has followed the wrong path, it is a duty to bring the erring person back to the right path by pointing out to him that he is doing wrong to himself by his bad behavior, as it is said, "You shall surely reproach your neighbor." The concern here is only to address the offender's sin or character, not a personal injury.
So the comment may not be personally painful to you, such as, using the word Jew in an offensive way, but it may just be a sin following the wrong path, making a sort of a racist comment. It may not affect you because you're not in that race, but it is a offensive comment. Okay, category number 2.
Sorry. Rebuke so that the rebuker won't incur guilt. The King James Version reflects a different understanding of the command, in which the conjunctive implies that one should not tolerate the offender's sin. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him. This aligns with Kugel's judicial model of reproach. One should warn a person with regard to their misstep, ideally privately, in order to prevent further sin and a public court hearing. Moreover, if an offender continues to transgress, the guilt can rebound on the one who failed to rebuke him. As the Aramaic Targum Onkelos suggests,
So just a comment. The Aramaic Targum Onkelos is the Aramaic translation of the Torah. So remember, Aramaic's different language, later language than Hebrew. So here is the Aramaic translation of this 1917. I probably read it. The la, it's not lo, it's la. Aramaic word for no is not lo, it's la, like Arabic actually. The la tikabel al delay chova. Do not bear sin because of him, because of the offender's own sin. So here is the idea that if I don't reproach or reprove someone, I actually now bear some of the sin. Let's see. I was going to add something. I don't remember what it was. Okay. Let's see what Maimonides has to say about this.
Maimonides concludes his pedagogical model of rebuke with a similar warning. Laws of character traits. Whoever has the opportunity to rebuke a sinner and fails to do so, he is considered liable for that sin, for he had the opportunity to rebuke him, but didn't.
Okay.
This is an extension of the idea that all Jews are guarantors of one another, that is obligated to take responsibility for the moral improvement of our fellow.
Okay, very common rabbinic phrase, Kol Yisrael Averim Zeh Bazeh. I'm just going to see where it's from, looking at footnote number 20. Yeah, it's from Sifra, which is and also in the Talmud in Sanhedrin. It basically, and I think, those of us that are Jewish have this very, now I got to find it again, have this very clear sense of Jews are responsible for other Jews. And so when there's a problem with a Jew somewhere in the world, Jews feel a responsibility to help. And a clear example of that, and far-reaching one, is the Ethiopian Jews. When the Ethiopian Jews were threatened, I think this was in the 60s, basically the state of Israel got them all out of their country and brought them to Israel. So despite the fact that they were different race, a very different culture, there was still this sense of all Jews are responsible for one another. Jim.
That 6:7, if you fail to rebuke a sinner, you're liable for that sin. If that were true and we all believed it, we would be spending our entire days on the internet trying to correct every single nutcase who's on the internet. Otherwise, we're guilty of everything.
So what I would call your attention to is the word whoever has the opportunity to rebuke a sinner. I would say let me be very specific. I think I talked about how a week or so ago I did a class on the Promised Land, and I got a bunch of comments, which we actually read in the class, and many of them were very nasty. And I didn't rebuke people for making those nasty comments because I am quite certain that that was not a realistic opportunity to rebuke. So, I mean, that's how I would let myself off the hook. So if somebody makes an idiotic comment, I have a friend who, he feels strongly about, I think, a bill before the California state legislature or something. So he's writing letters to the newspaper about it and so on. And I remember thinking, I can't imagine that someone's going to read a letter to the editor of the Acorn and that somehow that's actually going to change the vote of a state senator. But, maybe I'm actually overly pessimistic these days. So I would say, yeah. And there are people, as you probably know, who spend their lives on the internet rebuking both ways, both, from the right, from the left, and from pro Israel, anti-Israel. Everyone feels the obligation to rebuke. The way I interpret this is it's got to be in a way that actually has a possibility of succeeding, rather than just.
Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead, Erwin. Yeah.
I feel if I read these nasty remarks, if I respond, I bring myself to the same moral level as the person who is writing that remark.
No, so I mean, it's possible you bring yourself to the same moral level. If someone writes, on the internet, so and so is a jerk, and you respond by saying, no, he's not a jerk, you're a jerk, that now you're on the same level.
Exactly.
What I would say is, if someone says, and this I have done sometimes on on Facebook and other things. If someone writes a statement saying that Judaism is racist, I might actually respond by just noting that there are Jews of all races, and anyone of any race can convert to Judaism. So Judaism has nothing to do with race. So I would not consider that being put on the same moral level as the first person, because I'm responding with facts.
We still want to go to.
Yeah. Whoops, I don't know where that's coming from. There's a sound here. Okay, Alan, you need to unmute, Alan.
I have no idea.
Rabbi, my question has to do with for the sake of heaven. So when you're rebuking, does this concept that we're supposed to conduct, the things that we have discussions where we do it for the sake of heaven and not for the sake of heaven?
Yeah, so that's art. So you're talking about actually in the Mishnah in the Pirkei Avot, it
Yes.
says all arguments that are l'shem shamayim will endure, and arguments that are not l'shem shamayim in the name of heaven or for the sake of heaven will not endure.
Yeah. Can you fold that into this rebuke concept?
Yes. So what I would say is it's kind of like pornography. You know it if you see it. So, the example in the Mishnah is the arguments between the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai were considered to be for the sake of heaven because they were both trying their best to interpret. I'll just give one example, how you should hang a mezuzah. Should you hang it vertically or horizontally? But they were both arguing from text and from common sense about what is really God's intent. The example of arguments that are not for the sake of heaven, I think I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy who led a rebellion against Moses and Aaron, Korach, that's right. You're right. So the arguments between Korach and Moses were not for the sake of heaven, because the objective of Korach was to get power or to take power away from Moses. So I would say that's what's going on here. So, in the press, they'll get someone have a misspeak or a quote or trip, while walking downstairs, and everybody will make a big deal out of it. I don't think that's necessarily, for the sake of heaven. So I think it's kind of, is it mean-spirited, and is it designed to actually help things? Again, if you're criticizing someone in a public way, you're probably not going to make things any better. But if you do it in a private way, then you have a possibility of making things better. And as I conduct these classes, I'm just going to stop sharing because I think we're done with the text, at least for this evening. I will always try and phrase my comments in light of an idea that a person is trying to be authentic and contribute, rather than, boy, that's a stupid racist comment. So I mean, in my speaking, I strive to at least phrase things that way, with the understanding or with the objective that criticisms will be subtle but actually heard and not ignored.
And it's the way you say it. I think not all the time, but very often people say things that are really incredibly unkind. And what that makes me think very often is, you know what? If you would learn to respect yourself a little bit more, then you would respect others. Okay.
Yeah.
I really feel that plays a big role sometimes in people's behavior.
Yeah, I don't know that the person to whom you would say that has any sense that they don't respect themselves.
Well, I think sometimes it happens, though.
No, I understand, but
Right.
but saying that to someone,
Oh,
I would guess, would never have a desired effect.
no, you can't. Yeah, no. I meant just thoughts to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Rabbi.
Yeah, Erwin. Yeah.
You see, I sat several times at the temple, and when the rabbi finished, a rabbi finished the sermon, the person next to me said, "Oh, it didn't bring me to my spiritual level, And I always wanted to say, it depends how you look at it and how you feel what you heard. But it hurt my feeling.
Well, one easy way to say is, "I'm sorry you felt that way," or another way to respond is saying, "Huh, I really felt that it really touched me."
Yeah.
But But again, being critical for its own sake is typically not very helpful. If someone comes to me and says and responds in a sermon that I had a real problem with this element or that element, that can be very helpful. I'll give you an example. My very first High Holiday sermon was talking about, it was really sort of almost my own approach to interfaith relations. And I gave the president of Temple Ner Ami, and remember, this was before I went to rabbinical school. I had no formal or even informal training on how to do this. And I gave the president a copy of my sermon before I gave it. And I pointed out in the sermon that interfaith marriage between specifically a Jew and a Christian, can have a positive effect of now bringing an entire Christian family the reality that they have Jewish relatives. And that's, is going to encourage people getting to know each other better. And the reverse is also true. Having Jews who may be mistrustful of Christians now meet their, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, and so on, and can develop a different attitude. That's what I meant to say. And what the president of the congregation said to me was, you can't say this in a High Holiday sermon, because no matter how you say it, you will be misunderstood as being in favor of interfaith marriages. And as much as my initial reaction was to puff out my rabbinic impersonator chest and say, the pulpit is mine and I'll say whatever I want, I had to say that after listening to her, she was right. I absolutely agreed with her, and I was very glad that she gave me that criticism. It's actually a very interesting problem because people generally don't criticize the rabbi. They may criticize the rabbi to other people, but not to the rabbi's face.
Yeah.
And I've had this example. I've probably mentioned it. You've heard me mention it. I will have people tell me, chatting, and they said, a sermon you gave 2 or 3 years ago was so powerful and meaningful that it changed my life and changed my outlook. And then with some trepidation, I will ask, well, what was it I said? And of course, sometimes they can't remember, which is kind of fun. But even more fun is they will quote something I said, which I'm certain I didn't say it because I don't agree with it. But it was life-changing. It was life-changing for me too, making me even more careful about what I say. Jerry and then Alan.
I was just thinking about my belief many, many years ago, how can't water down the Jewish people. And after, having cancer and knowing the BRCA gene being passed to my other parts of my family, I was glad that my kids had a watered down version, and they don't carry that BRCA gene that killed my grandmother and 3 aunts. So yeah,
Okay.
um, it's just a way for me to look at it a lot differently.
Okay, that's looking at the bright side. Yeah, Alan.
Rabbi, you make this point about your former president at the synagogue listened to your point you were going to make, and you knew she knew it would be misinterpreted, right?
Yes.
And that causes me to sort of ask this question. It's a common problem where things get misunderstood and what you intend.
Mm-hmm.
How you can protect against that in a constructive way under this rebuke concept that we're discussing. I don't have an answer, but I have the question, which is, wow, that's kind of like, almost like you never can solve this problem consistently. You might solve it
Well,
sometime.
yeah, I would say the likelihood of being misunderstood is constant, and you can't remove it. What was helpful to me was not was helping me avoid being misunderstood on such a fundamental point of intermarriage. I wasn't coming out in favor of intermarriage compared to intramarriage, but I absolutely would have been interpreted that way.
I have a sister who happens to specialize in finding ways to misunderstand what I say.
Yes.
So when we're talking, and I'm not trying to rebuke her in this
Right.
context, but in the subject, the theme of rebuking is tricky, is really the point I'm trying to make.
So again, and you know, it's in some ways, I think, as Joanne said, it's how you say it. So I will never forget one of my first funerals, the very first funeral I had where there were military honors. And we did it kind of late in the service. And you have these soldiers in dress uniform and they fold the flag and they play taps. And it's quite moving and beautiful. And so they did that. And I was, thanking them and getting ready to leave. And one of the senior members of the congregation came to me to ask me a question. Rabbi, should we say Kaddish? And that was his very nice way of saying, Rabbi, I'm glad you're having a good time, but you completely forgot the most important part of the service. So that was a way of rebuking, in a way, first of all, he said it before we finished. So rather than having, several dozen people be really upset that we forgot to say Kaddish, he said it in time, and he said it in a way where he was almost deferring to my increased rabbinic wisdom, which wasn't half of his rabbinic wisdom. But it was the way he said it. And I would say the same thing with offering helpful, critical comments to a rabbi or anyone after a talk. You say, I thought I heard you say this, this, and this. And if so, that's problematic. Did I understand that correct? I mean, there's ways of criticizing which are gentle and helpful. Joanne.
Yeah, so clarity is really important. A lot of
Yes.
times we may communicate something and maybe it's like you said, it's misinterpreted. So I think that's, something that we need to think about. And also criticism, if it's done correctly, I think creates a healthy environment and sometimes can help to take you step out of the box. I know for myself, sometimes I'll be thinking something and then I listen to what others are saying and I'm like, I didn't think of that. You're right,
Right.
and I'm glad to hear what they have to say. So,
Yeah.
It makes us all better people if we
right,
allow.
Well, and it takes
right,
effort and it takes work.
right.
I did a class like this on Jewish law relating to abortion. And I know I had, it was a mixed audience and there were Catholics in the audience. And I didn't have any problems at all. Because I was clear over and over again saying, I'm not trying to change anybody's mind on this. I'm trying to reflect what Jewish law says about abortion and why Jewish law says it this way, and also acknowledging other interpretations which are reasonable, but it's not where Jewish law has gone. So I try and sort of diffuse the emotion, which can lead to, being accused of being a murderer. I once accompanied a young woman on her way into an abortion clinic, and there were people yelling and screaming at us and holding up pictures, horrible pictures of aborted fetuses and so on. And I think afterwards, as I was outside, I thought I would engage in a biblical discussion of abortion with some of these people. They had no interest in discussing it. Their interest was in screaming well, I mean, their interest was in preventing us from going in there, which I actually understand because from their point of view, we were about to commit murder. And I think if someone's about to commit murder, it is reasonable to try and prevent you from doing it. So I understand where they were coming from, but they clearly had no interest in a dialogue.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I don't know if you experienced or you heard this happening at funerals or Kaddish, but it happened to me when my dear wife passed away. God bless her. Somebody came over to me and says, "Oh, Erwin, she is in a better place now."
Were they?
And I almost fell off my chair. It was like the most horrible thing somebody could say, because I knew in my soul that, first of all, the person didn't know that when you go to a Shiva house, if the mourner doesn't say anything to you, you're not supposed to
I
speak
would
to
say
him.
95% of Jews don't know that.
They don't.
Yeah. So and
So the
I didn't rebuke
no,
because
and I don't think you should have rebuked, because there is not a doubt in my mind that they were trying to be comforting. They were not being hostile or mean or angry
no,
or
but it was a hurtful feeling.
yeah. So I had a rabbi who who said when someone says something like that, you should look down and look at their feet.
Yeah,
And I said, what do you mean look at their feet?
yeah.
And the answer is they're there for you.
Oh,
They may not be saying words that you personally find comforting, but recognize that they have come there to comfort you. And different traditions have different ways of comforting. Um, and in most, I would say, many people would find the words "they are in a better place." I would say the majority of Americans would find that to be a comforting and thoughtful statement. I absolutely don't believe that it's true, but I would recognize that it was said in a way to be comforting and thoughtful, and that's what I'm responding to, not not the theology.
yeah.
I
But
just,
that's also this idea: do you look for negative and insults, or do you look for positives and
Yeah,
good
yeah.
things?
I understand where you're coming from. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yep. There was a comment, I think I've said this before, you're supposed to say nice things in a eulogy. So this guy dies and everybody is saying nasty things about him. And the rabbi said, isn't there anyone here who can say something nice about this guy? And from the back of the room, somebody says, his brother was worse. Jerry.
I think so many people are uncomfortable with someone grieving. And our grief is so intense in this Shloshim period that people just don't know how to allow it.
Right.
And so it's almost dismissive by saying, yeah, they're in a better place, like they know. Um,
Oh, but again, the
I,
only thing
I
I would, I
understand
absolutely
the
agree. I absolutely agree with you. Um, but I wouldn't hear it as negative. I would hear it as positive.
well,
So, but that's how I choose to hear most things. Um, so that's my only comment on it. If I hear it as negative, is it conceivable that this person showed up at your home to say something hurtful to you? It's inconceivable.
yeah, we
So
don't.
they were being helpful in a way that they found comfortable. But it is true in our culture, we are uncomfortable with the idea of death, and in the presence of someone who is dead. Um, I often comment. I think most of I'm a chaplain for the fire department, and my typical assignment is I get a call in the middle of the night. Someone has died. The fire department or the sheriff said, "Would you like to have a chaplain come out?" And the person says yes, and so we get a call. So there I am, in the middle of the night. Um, God, I thought of a funny anecdote about that. I can't remember the point that was actually. Oh, so so after doing this, a few dozen or score times, it doesn't freak me out at all to have a dead body in the middle of the living room. And to be, comforting people and saying prayers and helping people plan notifications and so on. I'm there to be helpful. But it is interesting. I've heard this time and again, and I've seen it a little bit. I sometimes I know why I thought it was. Once I asked, 3 a.m, I asked them, Christian family, would you like me to call your pastor? And the response was, oh, we wouldn't want to wake him up in the middle of the night. I thought that was hysterical. But also, a lot of times when a non-chaplain comes, like a typical pastor or a rabbi, this may have been one of the first times they've ever been in the physical presence of a dead body who is lying in the middle of the living room or somewhere rather than in a casket and so on. And it's not unusual for a less experienced pastor to be freaked out by being in close proximity to someone who is dead. So our culture is not comfortable with death. And you're right, Jerry. I would say the person is saying he's in a better place. It's saying makes me feel better about it, and you should feel better about it too.
Yeah.
But it's I would just think about it as the way the person is saying it rather than what they're saying.
I would like to tell you an anecdote about this. It happened just recently, apparently. I was watching the news, and they had a big ceremony, I think in New York baseball stadium, and all the past very famous baseball players were there who were in a Hall of Fame.
Right.
And then they were projecting the names of the famous baseball players who passed away last year.
Right.
And Yogi Berra was standing next to Reggie Jackson. And Yogi Berra says to Reggie Jackson, I hope I don't see my name next year up there.
Yes. Yeah. Yogi Berra is famous for those comments. Okay. On that happy note, let us say, okay, Alan, you want to say
Just
something?
a question. In prior trips, after one of these classes, I've offered and people have optionally wanted to hang around while I show some pictures and talk about my trip to Israel. So I'm raising for whether next.
Yeah, let's see how far we get. I think this session is going to go on for several sessions. So,
Okay.
yeah, I would say why don't you be ready next time and remind me when we get started that I'll leave time at the end.
Monday or Wednesday, that's sort of the part.
Yeah, let's do Monday because
Okay.
okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Alan.
I
Okay.
was going to tell you, welcome back, Alan.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Take care. Stay well.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks, Joe.
Bye-bye.